The instant Patricia Harlow yanked my ID from my hand, I understood it was destined to be one of those afternoons. She lifted it toward the sunlight as though searching for hidden watermarks. Squinting at my perfectly valid driver's license with the suspicion most clerks reserve for counterfeit 20s at a gas station. "Nice try," she sneered, her tone heavy with condescension. "But you're not on our approved resident list. For all I know, this ID is fake." There I stood, arms weighed down with grocery bags, ice cream dripping in the July heat, planted squarely in my own driveway, while two HOA volunteers flanked Patricia like bargain bin bodyguards. One wore neon orange Crocs with socks, the other sported tactical cargo shorts, radiating the energy of someone who thought neighborhood watch was a paramilitary assignment. "Ma'am," I began evenly, "I moved in last week. Unit 47, Sycamore Court. I have all my paperwork inside if you'll just let me—" "Absolutely not," Patricia cut in, gripping my ID like a prize. "You'll vacate the premises immediately before I call the real authorities. We have strict protocols about unauthorized persons in Pine Valley Estates." I nearly laughed at the irony. Technically, I was the real authorities, something Patricia hadn't yet realized. Robert Mitchell, whose ID she was clutching like contraband, was none other than the director of the State HOA Oversight and Ethics Committee. My name is Robert Mitchell, and at 55, I thought I had already witnessed every variety of power trip imaginable during my 30 years in civil engineering and regulatory oversight. After my divorce last year, I downsized from a sprawling suburban house to something easier to manage. Pine Valley Estates seemed ideal. Quiet townhomes, mature trees, and manicured common areas. The realtor, however, had failed to mention that the community came with its own self-proclaimed tyrant, Patricia Harlow, HOA president for 8 straight years, and a woman who wielded her clipboard like a medieval mace. Most of my career had been spent navigating infrastructure regulations and zoning compliance. But 3 years ago, I had accepted a new role, director of the State Homeowner Governance Integrity Board, a bureaucratic mouthful for the agency tasked with keeping HOAs from transforming into petty monarchies. We investigated complaints, audited financials, and when necessary, had the authority to dissolve entire boards for violating state law. It was supposed to be paperwork, hearings, and the occasional mediation. I never imagined I'd become a case study in my own neighborhood. Patricia made her presence known within 48 hours of my moving truck's departure. On a Tuesday morning, she appeared at my door, clipboard in hand, blazer screaming manager energy from 50 feet away. "Mr. Mitchell," she barked without preamble, "I'm here about your lawn." I glanced at my ordinary grass. "What about it?" "The gradient exceeds our community standards. According to Section 4.3 of Landscaping Guidelines, slopes must remain between 2 and 4%. Yours appears to be at least 5.5. She then thrust a glossy pamphlet at me titled "Slopes That Keep Us Safe," featuring a stock photo of a golf course lawn. "I'll look into it," I said, mostly to get her off my porch. But Patricia was far from finished. Within a week, violation notices piled up like junk mail, each one more absurd than the last. Trash bins not aligned with magnetic north. Curtains inappropriate for summer decor. My Honda Accord parked at what she deemed a psychologically aggressive angle. I tried reason. At an HOA meeting, I introduced myself as a new resident. Patricia spent 10 minutes insisting she had no record of my closing documents and demanded proof of residency before I could even speak. "I literally live here," I said, trying to keep calm. "I pay HOA dues." "Anyone can claim to pay dues," she sniffed. "Until you're verified in our system, you're a guest at best. At worst, a trespasser." The final straw came when she barricaded my mailbox with orange cones, declaring it pending residential verification. I had to fetch mail from the post office for 3 days, which brings us back to that blistering July afternoon. Patricia gripping my ID like contraband while her minions guarded her as though protecting nuclear launch codes. "This is theft," I said coolly. "You can't just take someone's identification." "It's not theft when it's for community security," Patricia retorted smugly. Chad here will scan it through our system. Cargo shorts Chad produced what looked like a grocery store price scanner, waved it vaguely, and squinted at nothing. No match in the database. Unauthorized, he declared. I lowered my grocery bags, pulled out my phone, and began recording. For the record, Patricia, you're confiscating my legal ID because your personal database doesn't recognize me as a resident? She puffed up like an indignant peacock. I'm saying you're trespassing and impersonating a resident. We've had pool incidents before. I don't even swim, I muttered. Exactly what a trespasser would say, she snapped. At that moment, I made my choice. I could reveal my credentials, end her performance, and watch her deflate. But where was the fun in that? Patricia had earned something bigger. A proper investigation, complete with every bureaucratic nightmare in the handbook. Fine, I said, lifting my bags. Keep the ID. I'll be filing a formal complaint. Patricia actually laughed. With who? The HOA complaint box? I empty that myself. We'll see, I replied, walking inside. Don't get too comfortable, she called after me. 72 hours to prove residency, or I call the sheriff. Inside, I dropped my melting groceries and went straight to my office. Logging into the State Homeowner Governance Integrity Board's website, my own department's site, I began documenting everything. By morning, I had filed an official ethics violation under Article 19B of the State HOA Regulatory Code. Misappropriation of resident identification and abuse of localized authority. It was a serious charge, one that triggered an automatic investigation. Patricia, blissfully unaware that she had just poked the exact wrong bear, pressed forward with her campaign. She sent me a notice claiming my water would be shut off for non-compliance radiation emanating from the property, whatever that was supposed to mean. She even had Chad and his croc-wearing sidekick plant no trespassing signs directly on my lawn. The coup de grace came when she organized what she proudly called a community safety meeting, scheduled solely to discuss the so-called stranger situation in Unit 47. From my window, I watched as about 15 residents gathered in the common area, Patricia gesturing dramatically toward my house. 48 hours after I filed my complaint, the wheels started turning fast. The automated system flagged Pine Valley Estates for immediate audit because of the severity of the violations I had documented. That triggered a mandatory compliance visit from the state oversight team. I'll never forget Patricia's expression when 3 investigators, dressed in navy polos with official state badges, walked into the next HOA board meeting. I had arrived early, choosing a quiet seat in the back, just another concerned resident. Good evening, announced the lead investigator, Diane Chen, a no-nonsense woman whose tone demanded attention. We're here regarding multiple violations of state HOA governance codes. This meeting is now under official review. Patricia's clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. There must be some mistake. We run a very tight ship here. That's precisely the problem, Diane replied, pulling out a tablet. We've received a formal complaint involving identity theft, harassment, abuse of authority, and misuse of HOA powers. Patricia Harlow, are you aware that confiscating a legal ID is a federal offense? I was protecting the community, Patricia sputtered. From a legal resident who provided multiple forms of documentation? Diane's tone could have frozen lava. That was my cue. I stood up. Actually, I'd like my ID back now, Patricia. Every head turned toward me. Her face shifted from confusion to recognition, then collapsed into horror as Diane continued. For the record, the complaint was filed by Robert Mitchell, director of the State HOA Oversight and Ethics Committee. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to address the board? I walked to the front, savoring each step. I moved to Pine Valley Estates looking for a quiet place to live. Instead, I've been harassed, had my property blocked, my identification stolen, and even faced threats of eviction from my own home. In just 2 weeks, I've documented 17 separate violations of state HOA regulations. Patricia's face contorted like she had swallowed a lemon wrapped in barbed wire. You're the director? But you never said. I tried to introduce myself. You wouldn't let me speak at meetings because I wasn't verified in your system. The investigation that followed was thorough and devastating. Over 3 days, the state team combed through Pine Valley's records. They found that Patricia had issued fines for violations never mentioned in any bylaws, using her own homemade guidelines. Among her gems were rules on spiritual lawn maintenance and aura-based parking regulations. They uncovered a secret WhatsApp group, Enforcement Eagles, where Patricia and her clique mocked residents while sharing photos of supposed violations. One homeowner had even been fined $300 for aggressively cheerful garden gnomes. The financial audit was worse. Patricia had used HOA funds for motivational posters in her personal office, a surveillance system aimed exclusively at houses she disliked, and so-called leadership enhancement seminars that turned out to be a Bahamas cruise. But the real smoking gun? The database Chad pretended to check my ID against didn't exist. Verification results had been fabricated on the spot to intimidate targeted residents. The hammer fell at an emergency HOA meeting called by the state. The room was packed with neighbors who had suffered under Patricia's regime. I spotted the woman with the cheerful gnomes practically vibrating with vindication in the front row. Diane Chen took the podium, face stern. After a comprehensive investigation, we found Pine Valley Estates HOA in violation of 37 separate state regulations. Effective immediately, the current board is dissolved pending restructuring. Patricia shot up. You can't do this. I've run this HOA for 8 years. I've kept this community safe from chaos. You've been running it like a personal kingdom, Diane corrected. The state is placing Pine Valley under administrative probation. A temporary board will be appointed while elections are organized. This is all his fault. Patricia jabbed a trembling finger at me. He tricked us. He should have disclosed who he was. I tried, I said calmly. You stole my ID, remember? Diane pressed on. Patricia Harlow, you are permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in this state. You face fines totaling $47,000 for misuse of funds and false authority. Additionally, the identity theft charge has been referred to the district attorney. Patricia's legs buckled, and she collapsed into her chair, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver. 47,000, she whispered. Plus potential criminal charges, Diane added. The DA will decide whether to pursue jail time up to 3 years. Patricia's face drained of color. 3 years. But I was just trying to maintain standards. The room broke into bitter laughter. Someone started a slow clap. Chad and his croc-wearing buddy attempted to slip out, but were intercepted by another state official requesting their statements. Patricia sat hollow-eyed, staring at the fine documentation. She finally whispered, I'll lose my house. My job at the bank won't keep me if I have a criminal record. For a brief second, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered my melted ice cream and those 3 days of denied mail. Maybe you should have thought of that before weaponizing your clipboard, I said. The final twist came when Diane named the interim board. Robert Mitchell has agreed to serve as temporary board president. Patricia let out a strangled laugh. Of course he has. As the meeting ended, residents lined up to shake my hand or share their own Patricia horror stories. She stayed behind, silent, staring at the $47,000 notice. The last thing I heard as I walked out was her mutter. But his lawn gradient really was 5.5%.